I'm going to start building the Banana Hobby / Global Jet Club F5. So the first thing that I do, as always, is start with checking out all the parts and make sure they are attached to my satisfaction. So in this case, we have the vertical stab, which houses the rudder, and there's a servo in there. And before I attach the linkage, I want to pull this cover off, make sure that I understand how that servo is held in place. The rudder servo, and you can see that is a pretty good mounting system, beefy plastic, seems to be plenty of glue, so at least that's good. Next thing I'm going to do is pull out the servo, just see what type of servo it is, and hopefully it can handle HV. I think this is supposed to have HV servos, but doesn't look like there's much to do in here. I'm gonna pull it off, inspect it, and then close it back up again. Cool. So the only thing that I found in here that I recommend is when you look at these holes that are used to hold the screw onto the plastic cover, in my case, those screws that were going in those holes just didn't seem to have any bite, almost like the threads had completely eaten into the plastic. So what I'm gonna do is drop some CA into those holes, making sure to not, touch the servo mounting ears here, and add kicker. And what that should do is beef up that structure, very similar to what you do with wood. And then I will put the screws back in. So I've already done that on these two. I'm gonna do it on these two, and that servo should be mounted in there pretty solidly. Complete. Next step is figuring out which plug goes where. So in here you have two plugs. I'm assuming one is for the light and one is for the rudder, but they're exactly the same color of wire. So is it the one? Let's plug it in and see. Red to red, black to black. So that's gonna be like that. Let's see. Yes, indeed. You can see our LED light is on right here. And you can see there's two spots for the screws right here and right here. So we'll screw those in. Carbon rod goes in its spot, and we'll call this done. Hardware package, you'll find another hardware bag, and in here you will find these I believe they are M3 screws. They're really maybe 10 or 12 millimeters. I believe that's what's gonna go in the rudder. So since we're actually screwing this through wood and into metal, so let's see if I can show that. You saw that the attachment points are metal. I'm gonna add Loctite, blue Loctite, to my screws just to be safe, and stick them in there. One quick thing to note is that if you look at the mounting location, you can see that in there we have the foam, obviously, and then slightly deeper we have the wood that attaches or helps secure the vertical stab to the fuse. This kit doesn't come with any washers, so I added my own washers to the M3 bolt, and so that's going to distribute the weight evenly across that wooden piece in there. I highly recommend you do that, and we're going to now attach this in place. So pretty easy installation, nothing too crazy. Just like I like to do is go over my surfaces, go over servos, make sure I'm happy with what I see before assembling it. Next thing is going to be installing the rod, and this part of the plane is going to be done. So in the hardware kit that's provided for you, there's a bunch of control linkages. It seems like there's three kinds. There's these two that are of the same length. There's one, I'm not sure if that's bent because it's supposed to be bent, but I'm going to assume it's different. I'll find out as I finish the build. And then there's these that are all the same length. So I'm assuming it's going to be probably one of these guys that goes in the rudder. So I'm just going to take one of those try it out on the rudder surface. Yeah, it looks like a pretty good match. So if I straighten this out, you can see what that looks like. So I think that's gonna be the right linkage for that rudder surface. So I'm gonna power my servo on with my servo controller, center it, and then screw that in place. Step in the process is to find your it looks like 2mm screws from the package and just install them. So that's that guy and the accompanying lock nut, and 2 of them. So one goes in the back and one obviously goes in the front to secure the servo to the rod. And once that's done, the vertical stab is going to be done. It's time to mount that control rod, and because I just dislike flex, what I did is I figured out what adjustments I needed to make on my screws, and then went ahead and cut a hollow carbon fiber tube and fitted it exactly in between the 2 mounting points. That way this wire, which doesn't feel very strong, doesn't have room to flex in flight. So I'm gonna do that across all my surfaces. I also think it looks cleaner this way to have that control surface like that. So I'm gonna attach this in place, and vertical stab is gonna be done. Vertical stab is in place and done. Next up, probably the elevators, which are these guys, or stabilators. What comes in your package is obviously your 1 stabilator, your 2nd stabilator, and as you can see in here, those stabilators require some ball bearings to be mounted right in that space there, and that's what's going to be used to help the rotation around this fixed point. Those bearings are going to be found in your hardware package, and it is those guys right there. I'm going to install those, stick them on the plane, and then we'll come back after that's done. Now, a quick note: when mounting these ball bearings, make sure that they go in nice and level. You don't want those crooked, so when you look at it, it should be flush. So right now it's sticking out the surface, and I'm just going to slowly push it in. You want to get these as level as possible. That way this surface is going to be properly aligned with that guy. So quick note. And then obviously you have your spot where the rod that's holding the stabilator will stick out of, and we will insert our locking ring and tighten with a set nut that's also included in your hardware package. I have slid the surface with a ball bearing on it, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see there's a little piece of metal in there, and that's where the securing ring is going to go. That securing ring can be found in your hardware package, and you'll see it right there. So that's the ring and the set screw that you use to secure the stabilator in place. Since this is metal to metal, I'm going to use some Loctite. Oops, not too much, just a little bit, and I'm gonna get that started. Wipe off the excess here. Cool. So the stabilator is on. I repeated that process on the other side. I seem to be having some rubbing, so I had to sand this down a little bit, but I hope that that's the maximum amount of throw that I could get anyways. Now I'm gonna go and work on these guys, the rods. So that's gonna be pretty straightforward stuff. I won't show anything on video for that one. I will just do it and come back when that's done. So the elevator linkages are finally installed. and you can see them here. So I did a couple of things differently. So I'm gonna point those things out right now. I made a carbon rod, carbon fiber tube, and I put that rod inside the carbon fiber tube. Now what that does is it makes sure that that rod cannot bend, because it felt like a little bit flimsy and I just didn't want to take any chances. And to keep that rod in place, I just added shrink tube to both sides. And this is shrink tube that has glue in there, so it holds onto the plastic and to the carbon fiber rod, and now that rod is in place and is not going to move around. The thing that I would like to point out is, at least the way I'm looking at this, is that these rods seem like they want to be on the inside surface of both the part where they attach to the stabulator itself and the servo. And the reason for that is when this comes up or down for like elevator, you want it to clear, and I'll show you what I mean. So you can see right there, that's a bit of a tight tolerance. Let's see if I can move even closer. You can see that. So I think if this rod had been mounted on the outside, it would definitely have contact with the stabulator surface. So by mounting it on the inside, so that's your servo, the black, and then on the inside is where I actually mount the ball link and vice versa on here. So that way it's clear, so that surface can kind of move up and down as it needs to without interfering with the stabulator. So just a note, and that goes for both ends. You can see that here also, fairly tight tolerance. So that's it, that's installed, and next thing is going to be the wings.